This is my labor and delivery story. On October 31st, I went in for an elective induction, which was also my baby's due date. I went into the hospital at 7 a.m. They checked me and I was dilated to 5 centimeters, but no contractions. So they started Pitocin on me by 10 a.m. And from 10 a.m. to about 1 p.m., I hadn't really been feeling the contractions too hard. They were about 8 minutes apart. And after 1 p.m., it all of a sudden hit me. Contractions were getting very consistent, and I was in so much pain, I could barely speak. So I decided to get an epidural. They checked me before the epidural, and I was at 7 centimeters. But baby still had not dropped. So then they did the epidural on me. It did not work the first time, so they readjusted it, and it still wasn't working on one whole side of my body. And so they redid the epidural again, and luckily it finally started to work, but I could still feel things, but it was enough to just get the pain at more of a tolerable level. The epidural is just like a whole nother story though. Like my back is in so much pain now. When they put it in the second time, they kept hitting the bone, which is why I think my back hurts so badly. And also, I didn't just go numb from the legs down. I mostly went numb from like the legs up, and it was hard to breathe, and that was pretty scary. I could feel the numbness in my neck. So that was just like a whole nother scary story. Anyway, after I got the epidural, they checked me again around, I would say 3 p.m. and I was 9 centimeters dilated, but baby still hadn't dropped down completely. And so we were waiting on that to pop my water. So they just kept flipping me around and eventually popped my water around, I would say, 3:30 to 4, and right after that, they popped my water, the baby dropped down and engaged, and I was ready to push for about around 4, and then I pushed about 4 to 6 times, and baby was here. He arrived at 4:19 p.m. and he seemed fine. He was crying like normal until one moment he wasn't. So he stopped crying and his face started to turn purple, and at this point I'm looking at the doctors. I'm like, what is going on? Like, take my baby and make sure he's okay. And so they took the baby, and about 10 doctors rushed into the room trying to get him to breathe. And then they told me that they were going to have to bring him to the NICU and try to get him better. And I was like, okay. And then they're like, give him a kiss. And so I gave him a kiss, and then he just started crying. And then they put him on my chest because they seen that made him better. And then he started breathing better. His heart rate was still very high though. And they left him there for a few hours and was just monitoring him, but they had to monitor him overnight as well. But that was like the scariest 5 minutes of my life. It felt like hours. I was just looking back and forth at my husband, like, what's going on? Is he gonna be okay? But he is okay from that. But as most of you guys know, he did have jaundice, and they let us leave the hospital, but we did have to go back, and those stories are in my previous videos. But that's kind of what happened. It was a bit traumatizing for me. I was in shock for like a day or so after all that happened.